As we start talking about our different modeling features, it's also important to talk about where we can actually be doing a lot of the sketching that we need in order to create our models. In general, when we're sketching, we can sketch on any flat surface of our part. I used that nice top surface to begin with. Now I have an internal surface, well, not internal, but in a vertical surface, not on the edge of the part that I was sketching on, and finally on a diagonal surface. So long as our surface is not curved, you should be able to sketch directly on it. The other place that you've already sketched, no matter what, is on one of these original three planes. So we've got our front plane, our top plane, and our right plane. These three exist at the beginning when you first create your model, and depending on how you line everything up with your origin, you can see that my origin is right here so that I have everything centered. Depending on how you have all of that lined up, your planes may be in different areas. And I think that we talked about this a little bit, or we will talk about this a little bit when we talk about adding materials and finding the center of mass for our parts. However, in addition to that, this becomes a play when you want to get access and you want to be able to draw on these planes, because I think a lot of people, their default is they choose one of these corners and that becomes their origin and they build everything out from that. But what I find is that this surface and this surface and this surface, they're already accessible to me. That is a terrible arrow. I apologize. They're already accessible to me. So there's no point in being redundant and having access to them again. Instead, if I have my origin in a place that makes sense later for my rotation or makes sense later for my overall drawing, or makes sense for my mates and my assemblies later. Maybe I want to mate to a plane in order to make things line up nicely. Having that forethought in where I'm placing things tends to be helpful. And when in doubt, I tend to try to put it somewhere towards the center of my part, because this tends to work out nicely as far as it gives me access to areas that might be of interest to me that otherwise I would not have access to physically be drawing on. With this, we can still draw on any of these planes. You saw that I found them. Oops, it just disappeared, but over here on the left side of the screen, there they are. They're always available. Normally they're automatically hidden, so they disappear after the first time we draw on them. But they're still there and they're still available to sketch on like you saw there. Now, alternatively, we have the opportunity to go in and create reference geometry. Reference geometry, if you missed it, was this command right up here. And within it is the opportunity to create a plane. And with this, we can create a plane based off of three different references here. So 1, 2, 3. And we don't necessarily always use all three references. We can do a variety of things. Simplest way to think about it is, how do we define a plane? So we can define a plane using any 3 points. That is the simplest way of doing it. We can use these points as points like we have here, and that's what I'm going to do here in a second. But we can use these points that are part of our piece, or we can have, if we had a sketch, let's say I still had this circle here, it had a point in the center, I could use that point even though it's part of a sketch, not a corner. Or within reference geometry, so within this tool up here, we can actually create points. So you could physically click on a spot and create it as a point, and then you can use that point, that reference geometry later to create a plane. All of those are going to work for you. Alternatively, a line is just 2 points, so we can use 1 point plus 1 line. And if we have a line and a point, that basically I will be taking this line in a second and this point, and I'll take that line and that point, and I'll say that this line is on the plane, this point is on the plane. That would be the same as taking these 3 points, or taking any 2 points along this line and this point and saying they're there. And the other way this can be used is if I select a point on this line, I can say that I am perpendicular to this line. Let's see if I can't draw this well. Perpendicular to this line, and where I intersect this line is the point, so I can define it that way. So another spot there. Alternatively, anytime that I already have a plane, I can create another plane. So if I have this plane here, what we'll be seeing in a second, I'll probably try to fast forward through these since I've already described them, but it's easier to draw when my picture isn't moving around. But I can take that plane and I can say that I want another one that is a certain distance away from it. So I can add another plane like so by just using an existing one and adding an offset to it. Alternatively, I can take a plane and I can say that from this plane, I'm going to look at a line on it. Oops. And then I am a certain angle off of this plane. I am not artistically gifted enough to show this, but we will see it in a second here. So we can take a plane plus a line in order to create our overall picture. So we'll add plane plus line or point. We can do the same thing with a point, saying that we're perpendicular to the plane, and we can, well, we'd have to have a couple points there, but same idea. Or if we have a curve and we select that curved surface, which is going to be shown here in a bit, I can say that I'm tangent to that curved surface and use a line or a point to define exactly where I am tangent to that curved surface, because this would rotate as we go across the curve depending on where we're connecting to the curve. With this, I'm going to go ahead and resume the video here, but you can see that it's simply just a process of identifying all of these different aspects. So I've got 3 points that I selected there, those 3 outside points, and it's created a nice little plane for me that is, again, not one of my original ones and not even close to any of those. I've also got my surface where I've now offset, and I can change that offset value. I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit. I've got my point and my line where I create a surface that is connecting those just like 3 points would. I have my line and my single point, and you can see that I end up with this perpendicular piece here, just like I was talking about earlier. Again, I could draw it so that it wasn't the very end point. I just didn't have that for this model here. I can take a surface and a point and say that it is offset from that surface to a point instead of setting the specific offset distance. I can actually type in the offset distance like I'm doing here. I'm going to go ahead and add a curve here, and then you can see right there that I've actually, with just the piece, I now know that I'm tangent to that curve, and fortunately I don't have any extra points here, but I created one and it ended up being perpendicular because the point that I had was at the perpendicular point. Right here we can see that if we select 2 faces, we can say that we're halfway between them, which can be quite helpful because we do end up working halfway between surfaces fairly often with modeling. And then the last piece I have here is I have a surface and a line, and I've gone ahead and I can change the angle, and in this case I flip it out so that we can see it a little bit better with that. So lots of different planes, and really the ways to define them tend to be fairly straightforward. So hopefully This is a nice little review for you. And when you get further in the semester and you need to create the plane, you have a plethora of ideas. I think a lot of people try to stick to existing planes, but really remembering that you really just need to break it into 3 different points. And sometimes you can use lines or other things to reduce the number of steps in order to do that. So with that, take care. Good luck. Have a great day.